red when it's on. Sorry for the this.
What's the green light for?
To call to order the meeting for the Financial Review Committee for Tuesday, January 28th at 6 p.m. this evening. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, June 3rd. Well, that's still not the right date. What is the date today? Today's June 7th, 18th. Why don't I have the updated ones? Updated. June 18th, excuse me. Hold on. Okay. Do I need to do the roll call?
When your name is called, please answer with here or present. Member Frost?
Present.
Member Killebrew?
Present.
Member Vixoric?
Here.
Vice Chair Federico?
Here.
Chair Orlando?
Here.
For the record, all members of the Financial Review Committee are present.
Okay. Public comments. Any person wishing to address the Financial Review Committee during the public comment section on the agenda item is asked to complete a request to speak form available at the table within the City Council conference room. The completed form is to be submitted to the secretary prior to the agenda item being called by the chair and prior to the individual being heard by the Financial Review Committee. In order to conduct a timely meeting, there will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 15 minutes for the public comments portion of the agenda. At the chair's discretion, the balance of the public comments will be heard after the new business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the Financial Review Committee and should not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during the comments. State law prohibits the review committee from taking action items on specific items unless it appears on the posted agenda. If anyone has handouts to distribute to the committee, please follow proper procedure and hand them to the secretary. The secretary will see that everything is distributed. On to new business. We need a motion to approve the minutes from.
Madam Chair, can we ask and see if we have any public
Oh,
comments?
excuse me. Yes.
We have no public comments at this time.
Thank you. And then moving on to the approval of the minutes from the January 28th, 2020 Financial Review Committee meeting. Do we have any discussion?
I'll move to accept the meeting minutes.
Second.
Great. The next item of business. Do I need to do something? Say it's been approved? Yep.
I'll
I'm
take
sorry.
a vote.
Take a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Member Frost?
Aye.
Member Killebrew?
Aye.
Member Vixoric?
Aye.
Vice Chair Federico?
Aye.
Chair Orlando?
Aye.
By consensus, this motion passes 5-0.
Item number 2, the quarterly financial report ending March 31st, 2020. We have a recommended action that the Financial Review Committee receive and discuss the information provided tonight.
So staff report, if it's okay with the chair, I would like to take item number 2 and 3 together. We've kind of rolled through those. We had to cancel the last meeting and our regularly scheduled meeting. So everything that's transpired, I would like to just kind of give an update to date, and then you can take action to receive and file if you so choose. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to item 4, the PowerPoint presentation that should be in there. And quickly roll through this. Up until the point when COVID hit, the city's finances were tracking better than budget. But as soon as mid-March hit and the hotels, do you have the presentation? 3, sorry, 2 and 3 together.
Good.
My apologies. Roll back. So we were doing, the city's finances were doing fine up until mid-March. COVID hit. Hotels either closed down altogether or severely had a lot of bookings drop off. Since that time, a couple of updates have been given to the city council, up to and including a host of budget adjustments this year that took into account updates to revenues, including losses in our transient occupancy tax, our largest revenue, sales tax, our second largest revenue, and adjustments throughout the rest of our revenue stream. I want to give a quick update that as of this afternoon, looking at our revenues, we're tracking at that amended budget that the council approved last month. There's a couple of good things in there and a couple of things that are still a little bit soft. I'm waiting for sales tax numbers for a payment we get next week to see if we're on track with the coming in at the revised budget, which was $750,000 under the original budget. And then we won't get final sales tax numbers until early August. So, but at this point in time, it's looking like things are moving along. Hotels, my revised month of May projection, which was severely reduced from normal, actually came in about $7,000 above my revised projection. I'm expecting that's the April number. The May one, I'm expecting to do better than that, and I'm hopeful for June. But looking forward, the hotels are still figuring this out as they roll into it. They did see a surge I'll say a surge. Sorry, it's probably a bad word right now, but they did see a pickup in bookings when the tourism travel phase of stage 3 was allowed last week. They kind of saw some bookings ahead of that. We had the 2 big closures we had on hotels was the Monarch Beach Resort and the Laguna Cliffs Marriott. Monarch Beach Resort, I believe, is opening tomorrow for tourism travel. And the Marriott, we're still working on. It may be mid-July before they open. Given that the projections they had given me, the 4 big hotels had given me some projections that go out into through the end of this calendar year and into next year. So far, it looks like they might be tracking a little bit better, but who knows what might happen on any given day if we actually see a first wave of coronavirus hitting Orange County or some spike somewhere else and people start getting a little bit more reticent to travel like what we've been seeing. I don't know where this might go, but right now we're looking to track finishing this year at the revised budget numbers. I'm confident we're going to come in under overall on expenditures, and we did reduce a laundry list of line items in our budget from across every department, and the department heads and staff are doing a great job. Every contractor payment that comes up, they're looking to squeeze it without necessarily impacting service levels or the quality of services that we're providing. So staff across the board is looking and finding savings. So the intent here, the council amended this year's budget. We're rolling into next year's budget with what we know are higher than revenues that are budgeted higher because they were budgeted a year ago. But we're managing to really target a September major revise of the budget. And what that gives us is a better indication of how the summer's going with the hotels, a better indication for monies we get from the federal government. The state budget that the legislature adopted a couple days ago, The governor has until the 30th to sign it. Included in that budget is a little over $400,000 that would be available to us for reimbursement for COVID-related expenses. The county, we got a deposit in today for CARES Act money from them of $300,000. We already billed out $86,000 a couple weeks ago for a community development block grant that we're eligible for, and we're submitting claims into FEMA. And then the big one, the savior that we're hoping for would be at the federal level, the next round of funding. There's two competing bills. There's a HEROES Act and a SMART Act. They've kind of been put on hold a little bit. We're being told they're going to be taken up and discussed in about a month, end of July-ish. We'll see where that goes. If we don't, I'm not planning to get that. Every budget solution I'm looking for assumes we're not going to get any further help beyond the county, state, CARES Act, FEMA, and the CDBG. Those are pretty certain at this point in time, some of which I've received, others I'm pretty confident we're going to get. But at the federal level, that next round of bailout, actually assisting governments with lost revenues. I'm looking at every solution, assuming we're not going to get that. Right now, the projection is about a $6 million revenue hit next year, starting in a couple of weeks here. So we are starting to dial back. I've already got vacancies. Without really taking any major actions, there's already a $500,000 probably in personnel cost savings that I'm pretty confident we can stretch that a bit further. The sheriff's contract came in $677,000 under budget. So that's contributing toward that $6 million. And we're turning over every stone. So anyway, with that, that's pretty much the bulk of it. So coming back in September, I think that it might be wise that as we get into August and have some better indication whether or not the federal government's going to provide anything, that we plan a FRC meeting in the latter part of August prior to going into a budget workshop, the first meeting in September, and then really pushing to get our solutions to the budget adopted by council the second meeting in September, and keep rolling forward. So those are my thoughts on this, and I'm open for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mr. Killebrew. When we do come back in August and look at this here at the FRC ahead of council seeing it, by the way, thank you for trying to get that here for our review before it goes to council. I think we'll be able to do a good sort of pregame of hashing through all that stuff that you guys work real hard on the staff to come up with. The two things I'd kind of like us to focus on, one is obviously, and it's on page 2 of the blue handout at the top there, that whatever changes we make are in line with our financial policies. So if here as the FRC, we could agree we're going to do that at that meeting and just sort of check all those boxes that we're in line with our standing financial policies, whatever changes staff is recommending to the budget. And then to the extent we can do it here, and for the community FRC members, last year, I guess, when we adopted our last budget, staff worked really hard to create a priority-based budget where every item is identified as core, important, or value added. So that, and to someone's credit, whoever thought of that, in a time like this where you have to start cutting budgets, it's important to have an idea of what things should be able to be cut first, because they might not be a core service that a city is required to provide. But I think there's also some misunderstanding by some people who've looked at this, and I heard it at the council two council meetings ago where some council member mentioned that, well, that you can't cut that because it's core. And I don't think that that's the case. You obviously don't cut a core item first, but just because a core service is being provided at a, say, 5-star level, doesn't mean we can't reduce that to a 4-star level in tight revenue years. Does that make sense? I think to everyone. And so, Mike, to the extent we can, if we bring that back and we're making cuts, if we could just get a, kind of take a look at that. I don't want it to be a bunch of brain damage to do it, but the first cut that the staff and the council did was done in good revenue times, and it's easy to call things core and maybe overlook some stuff when you don't have to make hard decisions, but we do now, and so I'd kind of like to look at that here. Okay.
Great
And that's all I have.
suggestion. Anybody else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, for Mr. Kilbrute, I just wanted to mention, I appreciate you giving us a timeline by September, bringing something back. But I wanted to, I guess, just ask you questions on that in terms of, I do appreciate the idea, hey, let's not sit on this and move forward. But, realistically, you'll be the one to tell me if that's something, how much work has to go into that and our budget adjustments, especially given the fact that, August is pretty much dark. And, if we're going to come back in September with something to make sure that that's a timeline that is, realistic. And the other thing is, again, as you mentioned, and I'll say I appreciate this because ever since I've known you, you've done this, and the conservative budgeting approach has really served well for the city. And I think when you say you're not going to assume anything's coming in from the federal government, that's great. And if you work on solutions, and then if something comes in, it can only get better for us. But I guess the one thing I would say is, while I do appreciate that approach, and I don't know a crystal ball, I don't know what's in the future, but I would assume something's going to be coming. If I have no idea what the amount is going to be, but that's just from reading news accounts up until now, and the conversations. I think you were even in on one of them about they have different approaches by the end of summer of what they're going to do, coupled with the fact that looking at the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st, so that's when they're going to be probably getting close to that deadline when we really find out if we're going to be getting anything. And I guess it's sort of a question for you. You're going to do a lot of work, come back in September, then we find in October that more money's coming. Is it just an easy adjustment then if we have more money coming in? So I just want to get your thoughts on the timing.
Well, my thoughts are not to make decisions now given the unknowns, but it doesn't mean we haven't already changed what we're doing. So we started looking for fiscal year 21 solutions at the end of March. So my running solutions list and ideas started back at the end of March. We're doing a lot of our purchase orders. We started moving them last year to fiscal year starting July 1st instead of starting in the middle of the year and having to do contract or budget rollovers and that kind of stuff. So each of the departments has sat down with me, not only the department head, but their key staff. We've gone through every contract budget line item basically. And the purchase orders are setting up right now that take effect July 1st with the budget that was already adopted. There's already a list of reductions in those purchase orders where they're going to start managing to a lower level, but we're not necessarily cutting the services yet. So there's a mixture. We're not waiting to start. If money comes in that exceeds what we're looking at today, it's all good. So the September timeline isn't a rush, and I'm not worried about taking a look at every line item. It's not a bad exercise. It is work, but I think it's valuable regardless. We're looking at how we're delivering services, period. That's not a bad thing.
Mike, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have two. Actually, I have a real specific one. For the investment portfolio, can we get our returns on that little table? I'm sorry, I'm going back to number one on our, on the folder you guys gave out. On that was just sort of one thing I thought would be interesting to have on there.
Yeah, our monthly treasurer's reports has all that, so we'll get you access to those.
Awesome. And overall, did we do pretty well this year?
We have a very vanilla investment strategy. Sort of target a half or a little bit better, basically in overnight funds in a state local agency investment fund. They were performing just under 2% before all this started. They're down to, I believe, I looked at it this morning, it was like 1.25%. And then we've got laddered for the rest of our portfolios in T-notes that are, one matures every year. We go out 5 years, we buy a new one. And I believe we're at I'm going to mess that up. Probably 2.3, I'm guessing 2.4 overall. So very safe investments. You're not going to see us having investment losses during even the worst of downturns like we saw. And that's just the way the city's historically done it. And you look at our investment policy and it says we have to stay pretty vanilla. We could have been more aggressive and subject to some of the market risks, but with our investment strategy, we're not subject to that. What we're losing on is the opportunity to make more money, but what we're giving up there, we're gaining by not having the risk on the downside. So,
Okay.
but we'll get you the monthly.
Yeah, I was just curious. And then those amounts, I can't trace that back to the general fund assets because it's all the funds added together.
That same treasurer's report also has a breakdown of how much is in the overall.
Okay.
We have a separate fund in our books that keeps track of all of our investments in cash, and then each of the other funds owns a piece of that.
Yep.
And there's a report in the treasurer's report that shows that.
Okay. Other than that, whoever added the schedule with the previous year to date, I appreciate that. I thought that told a good story. So thanks.
I just have one quick question. If we do receive this HEROES Act money or the SMART Act money, how will those funds be allocated?
They would go to offset the revenue losses. So that's the difference with this next round of funding. The CARES Act monies that we're getting from the state and the county now, they only reimburse us for specific COVID-related costs. The FEMA reimbursement we're submitting is for FEMA-related costs. The Community Development Block Grant one we submitted, FEMA-related costs. This new round, the proposals are to backfill lost revenue. So it'll go to the bottom line, and we'll have a smaller hurdle to get over when we're looking at our various solution options. So,
And what FEMA related costs did we have in Dana Point?
all of our fees,
Gotcha.
the recreation staff and purchases we made to serve 300
The
weeks
seniors.
worth of meals a
Gotcha.
week,
Okay.
and on and on. Face or masks, some overtime on other staff doing things. Hopefully some of our sheriff's response. So I'm working with them on how to structure how they bill us for what otherwise would have been normal deputies out in the streets. But Matt Senacori had them running around chasing temporary no parking areas and all kinds of other things. And we've got other contract costs we've incurred for street adjustments on street parking and so forth. So
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Jamie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that brings up a good point in my mind related to financial policies. If we say in September, get a chunk of HEROES Act money, does that money need to go to, I guess, something that you can look into later? Does it need to go to backfill reserves that the council has already agreed to use, or can you use it to offset planned cuts in expenditures for 21?
what we have to look at, and it's core to the financial policies, is identifying what are one-time, either good or bad, hits and what is an ongoing. So if we determine on our outlook that our revenue ongoing is going to be hit, then we need to dial everything back so that we have a balanced operating budget, ongoing revenues and expenses. If it's a one-time, it's a decision to be made on whether or not to backfill the revenues to keep, operations, if you will, at that level. But we have to have a plan in place to refill the reserves. So it all kind of works together, but the reserves are definitely part of the discussion. We don't just stop and say we solved this year's budget problems because we've used some of the economic stability reserve. We have to have a plan to refill it.
Okay. Mike, that took care of items 2 and 3, or was that just item number 4? Because we kind of bounced around a little.
That was item 2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Jamie, that's the old agenda. Oh, yeah. So that was 2 and 3. If you want to,
Now you're confusing
you want to
yourself.
make a motion to receive and file items 2 and 3, then we can move on to 4.
May I have a motion to approve and file items 2 and 3 on the agenda?
I move the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Do we have to have a vote for that one too? Jamie?
Member Frost,
Aye.
Member Killebrew,
Aye.
Member Vixoric,
Aye.
Vice Chair Federico,
Aye.
Chair Orlando.
Aye.
By consensus, this motion passes 5-0.
I do think it's Matt's fault too. Just kidding. Action or new business item number 4, community facilities district update.
Yes, we're going to turn this over to our financial advisor for the Community Facilities District bond issues, who's on the call. Jim Fabian from Fieldman Rollap. Jim, you're on, and we're going to be going over the attached PowerPoint. Jim, introduce yourself.
Great. Yes. Hi, this is Jim Fabian of Fieldman Rollap and Associates, the city's municipal advisor. Yes.
Can you turn off the YouTube live that you're watching? It's giving us feedback.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
Okay, great. It was interesting. I could hear you well, but I couldn't see anything on it anyway. So I'm not sure why I wasn't able to view anything on the YouTube live. But thank you for allowing me to participate in the meeting via conference line. And as Mr. Killebrew mentioned, we're here in front of you to discuss an opportunity to refund the outstanding bonds related to CFD 2006-1 for the Strands. And I'm going to walk through a presentation that will provide an overview of the Strands project and discuss the proposed refunding. And please let me know if you have any questions. So I'm on slide number 4. Hopefully you're there with me in terms of the overview of just showing in terms of the acreage and the background of the Strand project. We have the 118 custom lots, the non-residential property, and then the dedicated property for open space, conservation, and public right-of-way. So it's roughly 121 acres, and the special tax is levied against the custom residential lots and then the non-residential property as well. Going over to slide number 5, just in terms of the background or history of the CFD, the I'm sure the project started well before 2002, but the development agreement was approved at that time. The City Council started the CFD process in 2006. That formed the CFD and then approved an acquisition agreement. Then in 2008, the first series of bonds were sold. And then in 2013, we had the second series of bonds sold. And then in 2014, we actually came back in with another series of bonds that were sold. And at that point in time, the developer had all of the reimbursements required to be provided to the developer for the public infrastructure were reimbursed at that point in time back in 2014.
Hey, Jim, can I interrupt here for a quick second? And thank you for being brief, but
Yes, sir.
I want to mention that this is a Mello-Roos tax on property tax bills. The developer was required to construct public improvements. So Strands Vista Park, there was storm drain work. There's the revetment down on the bottom and the sidewalk, and other trails and other amenities, the funicular. And this allowed him to get reimbursed for constructing those public facilities. So we issued the bonds, we paid him for the public facilities, and now the property owners down there are making the debt payments to repay the bonds. Go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, continuing on slide number 7. Okay, so on slide number 7, we have in front of you the proposal for refunding the bonds now in 2020. The goal of the refunding would be to maximize the savings. Using the 1920 assessed valuation, the amount of the assessed valuation of the property within the CFD is close to $1 billion. It's $960 million. When you take that value and you divide it by the amount of bonds outstanding to be issued, we have a value to lien ratio of 24-1, which is very, very strong. The city's policy is 3-1, and the acquisition agreement requires a value to lien of 5-1. So we're well in excess of the requirements. Going over to slide number 8, you can see there that we have a maximum special tax that is levied each year. That is $25,700 for the residential lot, and then $15,000 an acre for the non-residential commercial property and future hotel site. There's also a maintenance component that is levied for the maintenance of the public infrastructure. We have 3 parcels that are for the commercial site and 3 parcels that are for the hotel site. And then we have the 111 residential lots that will be taxed for the proposed refunding and are currently taxed. To date, we've actually had four residential lots that have prepaid their special assessment in the past. So going over to slide 9, the special taxes levied against the property within the CFD provide the revenue to pay the debt service. There's no general fund payments included or required for this repayment of this bond. It's a non-recourse bond to the city. There's no liability for the city. The bonds are solely backed by the value of the property, and that's why that $960 million value of the property was pointed out earlier, because it provides significant incentive for people to pay their property taxes, which include the special taxes, in order to protect their position in the property. We levy about $2,995,000 a year for special taxes. This is for the required debt service on the bond, to pay administration, and then also to provide some coverage in case of delinquencies that might occur within the CFD. The average residential lot value is approximately 6.3 million. And there are some delinquencies within the CFD. And presently, as of May 21st, we had 18 parcels that were delinquent. It's not uncommon to have some delinquencies just due to the timing of property tax payment by residents, but the one owner of some of the commercial property is also delinquent. Going over to slide number 10, looking at the proposal for the 2020 refunding bond. Again, we'd be looking for a not to exceed amount of $42 million. This would provide the required amount to refund and pay off the existing 2013 bonds and the 2014 bond. The other thing that will be accomplished by this refunding is that we're actually accelerating the repayment of the bond. So the actual reduction in debt service actually decreases the term of the bond. So rather than September 1 of 2045, it is now September 1 of 2043. This was a goal of the city to look at trying to shorten the term of the bond, and we're going to be able to accomplish that due to the lower interest rate environment that exists at the present time. Again, the bonds are non-recourse to the city, so there's no liability to the city for repayment of the bonds. And we will be seeking an underlying rating from Standard & Poor's. There are criteria for Standard & Poor's to provide a credit rating on these type of community facilities districts that are primarily built out like yours is, and with the high level of value to lien, we think we're confident that we'll get a strong credit rating for the CFD, which will translate into lower interest costs on the refunding bonds. On slide number 11, wanted to show the sources and uses of the bonds. So you can see we're going to be issuing roughly $40 million. Typical for us to have a little bit of cushion in the not to anticipate going up to the full $42 million. $39.5 million is a good number. We will have some original issue premium that bondholders will pay to us. The current reserve fund will be used as a source to buy down the refunding. And we have some accumulated money that has been on hand. That's the special tax account, the bond payment account, and then the collected special taxes for the 9/1/2020 debt service will be used. So when you add all that up, it's about $47.6 million. That will be put into an escrow fund. As you can see there, the first bucket to be filled is the escrow fund, and that is a account that's set up and held by Wells Fargo, and it will be used to defease the outstanding 2013 and 2014 bond. Additionally, we'll have a new debt service reserve fund that is funded with the bond proceeds, and then we'll have our fixed cost of issuance and underwriter's discount. Going over to slide number 12, this is a summary of our savings. As you can see, the savings on the 2013 bonds on the bottom row is in a net present value, factoring in the cost involved, results in almost 15% net present value savings. The 2014 is a little over 4%. On a combined basis, it's 8.3%. The city's financial policies require a minimum of 3%. Typically, we wouldn't recommend doing anything unless it was a 5% net present value savings, factoring in the cost to do the refunding. So by doing this refunding and take advantage of the lower interest rates, we're able to shorten the term of the debt by 2 years, as is mentioned there on the bottom of that slide. Going forward, On slide 13, we'll be presenting, assuming approval by the FRC, the financing and legal documents to the City Council in July. That will include a bond purchase agreement with the underwriter, Steeple. They were involved in the 2013 and 2014 bond. The fiscal agent agreement with Wells Fargo Bank provides all the terms for payment of the debt over the remaining term of the debt. The escrow agreement provides for the paying off of the 2013 and 2014 bonds. The preliminary official statement is used to market the bonds to investors, and then we'll have a continuing disclosure agreement where the city agrees to provide the bond marketplace with ongoing information on an annual basis. So looking at our proposed schedule on slide 14, again, we'll be securing an underlying rating from Standard & Poor's. We'll go to the council scheduled for July 21st. We will be pricing the bonds right around July 30th, and then closing the bond issue on August the 13th. And then in closing is a snapshot of the Strand CFD. So happy to answer any questions that you have.
So if I could add before opening for questions that we facilitated this transaction. The city itself is not obligated on it, but we do have a fiduciary responsibility from the get-go to manage these responsibly and to literally take into account that investors made an investment here, and it's on us to make sure that we're collecting everything that's due, that secured the debt that they bought, and that we also get the best deal. So when we marketed the bonds originally, when we did a refunding earlier, and now here's an opportunity to, quote, get the best deal for the property owners as well. It's more typical and actually rare to not take a savings. It's not unlike refinancing your house where you get a lower interest rate. In this case, instead of, it's like going from a 30 to a 15 year, we're only getting 2 out of this, but it's not typical in these CFDs to go that route where you're shortening the term. Usually you're going to lower the Mello-Roos payment for the property tax payers in the district. But this still serves the fiduciary responsibility to get the best financial deal. And I think serves a community purpose by shortening the term of Mello-Roos or community facilities debt in the community itself. So with that, we're open for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Jim. It's Mike Frost. Actually, this was a very interesting PowerPoint. I'm just curious about the process. Is it the HOA that's going to you, and Jim is a consultant for the developer or for us?
So the financial advisor, there's an underwriter, there's bond counsel, there's the escrow trustee. There's all these, those are all contracts with the city. We're responsible for making sure that this financing is done responsibly. HOA is not involved. The individual property tax owners basically have a lien on their property and have to make the tax payments. But it's still incumbent on us to carry out our fiduciary responsibility, both to the bondholders and to the property tax payers, to get the best deal here.
And this is more just process. How do we know that they're okay with shortening the duration of the lien itself, just because they're very wealthy and they can probably pay it anyway?
It's not a decision where we take a poll of the property owners. This is on us. So we could go that route also and turn this into lowering the $25,700 a year taxpayer payments for the residential. By the way, doing a community facilities district in this community was somewhat contentious when it happened. And I think if you read the paper regarding some other government entities with outstanding debt, it's not such a bad thing to focus on shortening the duration as opposed to lowering the bill. So this is on the city to make the decision whether or not we want to go that route. It wasn't a vote of there's no mechanism in here for us to pull or include those comments in it. They're certainly welcome to come to these proceedings and make an argument. This is what I'm recommending as the best approach.
Thanks. Yeah, and there wasn't a criticism. It's more just questions. And Jim's costs, as well as all the transaction costs, are in the sources and uses and would never hit our budget. Is that fair to say?
That is, they get paid if we actually issue the bonds, and they don't otherwise. Comes out of the proceeds.
Cool.
I could just interject there too. So the cost of the transaction are factored into the net present value savings as well. So that 8.3% that I identified and factored in the cost of the consultants and the new reserve fund. So that has been factored in, and the savings reflects that cost.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Jamie?
Okay, quick one. Mike, I suspect I know the answer to this, but why not ask? Is there any unreimbursed staff time associated with managing or just accounting for all of this, or is the staff time paid for out of the tax payments that come in?
Staff time is covered through the CFD, whether from tax payments. We do. Robin was just submitting the annual budget. We went over it this afternoon for next year, and we give it to the trustee, to Wildan, that's processing all the transactions. Then she submits an actual bill for staff time and any costs we incur, legal costs, and so forth.
Thanks. So I guess one of the reasons I asked that question is the city really is completely objective in this, whether it's shortening the 2 years or lowering the payment and keeping the term the same. There's no benefit to us by shortening it. It's not costing us anything either way. So I'm in favor of just shortening it.
Any other discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to follow up on what Michael was saying. And actually, these questions for Mike usually ask staff, and I already asked you this and you tried to head me off already, but it really goes to the fiduciary duty that you mentioned. And I think this was kind of the point that was being brought up. Ultimately, this goes to the city council. And you're talking about a fiduciary duty to the city has to the bondholders, correct? Now, and that's good for the Financial Review Committee to look at. But when it gets to the city council have a fiduciary duty to the voters, which I think was kind of what the question was. We don't really know what the goals are of the residents who have to pay this, whether they would prefer to pay less and keep the term longer, or whether they would prefer to pay more. And I don't know do we actually have numbers on, how much more? I'm not going to make any assumptions. Hey, these people can afford it if we're going to make them pay more. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just wondering do we actually know what the effect is on the individuals who have to pay, what the actual numbers are?
That's a great question. Thank you.
There are other reports as well. Let me go back a step first. We do not have an absolute obligation to do this. And honestly, given everything else on my plate right now, this was something that I could have just walked away from and we wouldn't have gotten in trouble for it. The outstanding bonds are getting paid. But this was an opportunity really to shorten the duration of debt in our community. So there's no absolute obligation to do this. I feel it's a fiduciary responsibility to always get the best deal. Having said that, the city council's is really the fiduciary for the bond issue. And the bond issue includes not only the purchaser of the bonds, but also the taxpayers. So the taxpayers are making their payments, and it's on us to make sure that the payments are getting collected and the bonds are getting repaid. So it's a package deal here. There's no one person. Well, I would say the bondholders are the most important people in this whole thing. I've been doing this for, in my 30-year career, 26 of those years have been dealing with public debt. And I've always put it first and foremost, protect the bondholders. They put trust in the city that they were buying debt that was going to not be risky, if you will. So everything I've probably done $3.5 billion worth of bond financings over the years, a bunch of refinancings. So is there a responsibility to go reach out to the property owners? That's a policy call. It's certainly not a requirement, and they are important, obviously, but I'm not sure I answered your question. We don't have an absolute responsibility to do this at all.
No, I mean, let me just be clear. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm against this idea. I'm just asking questions for the discussion, and I don't necessarily see the two things: the duty to the bondholders and the duty to the taxpayers as being mutually exclusive. I mean, I think they could be aligned, and if they are, then this sounds like a great idea. And I also understand that interest rates are very good right now. And one more time, I compliment you for seeing an opportunity and proposing this, that we do this. That's great work. And it is a good opportunity that I think, we should seize while we have the opportunity. But the one thing that I'm not, for certain yet and comfortable with, what I don't want to do is find out if those two things are in conflict, and it turns out that ultimately we could make the recommendation to send this to the city council to discuss, and when we get it, then we're going to have to discuss it there and determine whether we want to maybe delay it or find out. I don't know how we would do it, or talk to the HOA, or somehow informally poll the taxpayers, since we're only talking about one subset of taxpayers here, the ones in this Melrose district. So, I'm not saying we shouldn't advance this tonight, because I don't know what's going to happen with the rates, and I think that we don't want to miss the opportunity right now. So I don't want to delay it for that reason, and I think I would support moving this on to the city council from here to look at. But that's really the one thing that I'm going to have to take into account when we get it is, is this the right thing to do with our fiduciary duty to the taxpayer? So those are just my comments, but I think ultimately
One thing I'll make sure I include in what I bring to council would be going the other route, keeping the term the same, and what would happen to the tax payment. It's not going to be a lot, but I'll go ahead and provide that to say what would the benefit be to these folks that have a special assessment of $25,700 when their average property tax bill, the 1% they pay, I believe, is around $48,000, and upwards of over $100,000 a year in a property tax payment. So we'll go ahead and provide that, though. I literally just printed out a report an hour ago that has all the different runs with the valuations and stuff, and some sample per an average property what the property tax hit is. So we'll include that in the report we bring to council.
thanks.
I just have a quick comment. You mentioned that 18 of the properties are in default, and you said that it's pretty standard to have a few. Is this your consideration of what a few is for 118 properties? I don't know. That's why I'm making sure I understand.
18 is a higher number than normal. There's several of the parcels, and I'm drawing a blank on the number that we took to council. Seven of those 18 are it's 3 LLCs, but it's one person involved, that we took action at a recent council meeting to start down the basically foreclosure process. We've been down this route a couple times, but when you
With
look
the
at
same individual or
No,
same LLC?
no.
Okay.
No, but with different property owners, it's not uncommon for property owners to be, on vacation in Italy. And if you think of COVID hitting, some of their, keeping track of all their financial bills, they may not be here. That's not been uncommon for somebody to be out of the country for 3-6 months, and they get back and they say, oops, and they not only pay the bill, but they pay the penalties and interest and any legal costs we incur, chasing them down. 18 is a higher number, but 7 of them relate to one individual. The average price of the dirt has been over $6 million.
Mhm.
The average home prices are more than that. To let a property worth $10 million go to the courthouse steps for auction on a $25,000 tax bill, we've found over and over again. We've never actually foreclosed on one in the 12 plus years we've been doing this. They find a way to pay the bill. And so it's very highly leveraged debt issue. So there's plenty of value there to pay the bill. So yes, 18 is a higher number than normal, but we're actively pursuing one in particular that has 7 of these parcels, and the rest of them we're chasing down, and expect, as usual, we'll get catch-up payments here shortly.
Okay, and then one other thing, if we do recommend this to go to council, will these 118 homeowners, or however many homeowners there are, be notified that this item will be on the city council agenda so they can have a chance for public comments?
We can certainly do that.
Because that might kind of solve some of the other comments that you guys were talking about, making sure they have a voice in this. Any other comments on this item? Do we need to make a recommendation?
The way this was laid out, because of we were losing time with canceling meetings and everything, is basically I made a statement in here that we're bringing it on July 21st. If this group wants to recommend against it, then we'll have to take that into consideration. But otherwise, it was more of a receive and file at this point, and
Okay.
go listen to your discussion. Kind of awkward, because normally I would have been bringing it to this group with a recommendation to do it for the council. Certainly, there could be a substitute motion, which I basically put in here, receive and discuss. But if there wanted to be a recommendation, that's fine too.
Anybody have any discussion, or should we make the recommendation?
Yes, Madam Chair. I mean, quite frankly, I already knew that he had said we were going to
Gotcha.
forward it on to City Council. I know that we're going to do it, but I did want to just bring up some of those things to see if at this level the FRC wanted to talk about it. I mean, I don't know if we need to make a motion and to move it on. It's going to move on either at the next meeting or the meeting after that, and that's something that we work on with putting together the agenda. But yeah, I don't think we need to do anything if that's the will of this.
You good
This
with it,
committee.
Mike?
I think it's we don't, Madam
No,
Chair, if
go
I
ahead,
might.
yeah.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that we certainly don't need to, but I don't think it's the worst thing to make a recommendation to the council. If I think I know where Mr. Kilbrew stands on it.
Yeah.
I certainly would recommend that the council approve this bond measure, and certainly the council can discuss the shortening the term or reducing the payment. I personally agree with shortening the term. Mr. Kilbrew, does the city have any other bond debt?
None.
So I love the idea of being out of the bond debt business 2 years earlier if we can. We've got the council's we all have fiduciary duties to the city. That includes our residents, that includes, in this case, bond holders. But ultimately, if my own personal opinion is get out of debt 2 years sooner than later. The homeowners that purchased those properties purchased them with the understanding they were going to pay a certain Mello-Roos tax payment on those houses for whatever the initial term was, 30 years or pick a number. They had no expectation that they were ever going to get a lower payment ever. So if they get 2 years off, and that's roughly 30 grand-ish per property, it's just a windfall for them. My 2 cents. So I'll wait and see if anyone else wants to make a motion, but I do think it's maybe worth doing.
I agree. I think this recommendation is definitely worth doing. You're looking out for the best interest of everybody, including the city and the residents, and saving some money. I think we should make the recommendation, but I would like to see that the homeowners get notified so they can have an opinion. Okay. So that's it. So you would like a motion now?
I think it would be appropriate if I
Okay.
take it to council and say the Financial Review Committee is recommending it, then take a motion and a vote would be appropriate.
I would like to make a motion to approve this recommendation.
Second.
Okay, I'll take the vote now. Member Frost?
Aye.
Member Killebrew?
Aye.
Member Vixoric?
Aye.
Vice Chair Federico?
Aye.
Chair Orlando?
Aye.
By consensus, this motion passes 5-0.
Do we have any other staff reports?
Do you have a staff report?
Oh, is Jim still on the phone? Thank you, Jim. Can you hear us?
Thank you, and have a good evening, everybody. Take care.
Great presentation. Any Financial Review Committee reports? Great, perfect. So I would like to adjourn the meeting, and we will wait to hear. I think we have a meeting scheduled in July. Is it tentative for now? Tentative.
The regularly scheduled meeting would be the last week of July. So the last.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.